Welcome to The Third Side Convo with your host, Bob Phipps. Your panelists today are Deborah Lupton, Jeff Nolan, Michelle Walters, and Larry Haber. And now, your host, Bob Phipps.
Welcome to the Third Side Convo today. We are going to be talking about something that is supposed to be an apolitical organization called the Supreme Court. Why is it all of a sudden being so much of an issue that's talked about? They're actually going to talk about actually changing lots of things, and we're going to talk about that today. But why is it seeming that it's not as why is it becoming partisan? Well, I looked a little bit into the history, and apparently back in the history, it used to be lots worse. There was all sorts of issues. People put their friends in the Supreme Court. It really didn't have the same process it had recently. And also, over the years, sometimes people would be put in by a conservative president, and they would turn liberal. That actually happened apparently more than it happened the other way. Very few Democrat presidents appointees have gone in and they haven't turned conservative. But let me tell you, it has happened the other way. The funny thing about it is I was reading about why that happened, and one of the things they called it the cocktail party effect. Now, the cocktail party effect was, imagine you're in Washington and imagine you're going to all these cocktail parties. Well, people wanted to seem reasonable. Well, reasonable meant they had to go away from their conservative tenets such that they could be accepted at cocktail parties. Well, whatever the reason is, right now there's no question that the Democrats think that we've got this conservative court, that it's a 6-3 court, and it's an unfair court. So, dadgummit, we got to do something about it. A lot of these things they got to do about are not going to be real easy to do, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So for our panel, we have four we'll just say ideologically different people. And what we're going to do, though, is we're going to keep the politics out of it, and we're going to try to discuss what can we and should we do about the Supreme Court. All right, so I'm going to go in and start out on the left side this time, and we're going to start out with Deb, because it is the Democrats that seem to have the problem with the court right now. So, Deb, what's your thoughts on this Supreme Court that we're having to deal with right now?
I think it's way past time that we had correction to the Supreme Court so that it wasn't a lifetime appointment. It just creates corruption. We've already seen corruption with Thomas. That I think he should be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors and should be booted off the court and given a message to the other Supreme Court justices that what they're doing is not okay.
Now, these guys aren't politicians, Deb, so obviously under Uber discourse, I wish we could keep the discussion to be without the specific person, even though I understand that the ethic rules that are wanting to be put in there are relating to a couple of things. There have been ethics problems all throughout the years. I'd more rather discuss, is it constitutional, for example, for the Congress to put in ethics rules on the Supreme Court? Larry, this is almost a discussion we probably need 4 attorneys on, and we don't have them here, So, Larry, aren't there some constitutional issues we're going to have and even affecting the Supreme Court?
We do, and I'm not a constitutional expert, even though I've been doing law for quite a while. So the problem is that if you're going to try to tackle this right now with whether it's constitutional or not, I don't think you're going to be able to do that.
Okay. Jeff Nolan, what have you read about this? You read about that it's going to be tough to change these things?
Yeah, I think that I think we're deluding ourselves if we think that the Supreme Court's somebody's going to snap their fingers and increase the size of the Supreme Court. I think that we have a better chance at getting legislation that would maybe put a term limit. I think 18 years is what has been being discussed. I haven't thought about it, as far as whether or not that's a number I agree with, but I do think that the lifetime appointment, even though I honestly believe it was put in place with the best of intentions, I think that as the people have evolved or devolved, it has become a liability, and having a hard out would be good.
Okay. Michelle, what are your opening thoughts to the issue of revising the court, let's say?
My opening thoughts are, it's it's going to be difficult on trying to enact some of the changes that the other side is trying to propose. I think that it's almost virtually impossible. But I do believe that the Supreme Court has taken into account some of the discourse that they have received, and they have tried to establish a certain code of conduct that they are supposed to abide by. I think the unfortunate thing, though, is there is no way to police that. I give them full credit on enacting that. It's just, I think it's difficult because there's nobody there to oversee it.
Well, they police themselves.
Exactly. I know.
It's a joke. It's a joke. The policing is, to me, it's just ridiculous. And I think they did it just to move people off of the topic. But when you don't have to abide by it, and you have certain justices still getting all kinds of free multi-million-dollar trips and loans to the tune of, over $250,000 and all kinds of stuff, no ramification whatsoever. That's the problem right there. There are some rules, and they are not abiding by them, and there has been no consequences.
No, and unfortunately, that is the case. So there doesn't necessarily seem to be a consequence to their actions, because there's nobody that's going to oversee them. But they are taking actions on to stipulate certain conditions, guidelines that they need to stay within. And I think that at least that's a start. At least it's a start to address that there is an issue, address the fact that this does need to be discussed, and that there are parameters that need to be in place.
Jeff, have they had things all along? I'm not sure whether, is there any ethics rules that do relate to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, but they're all internal, and they're all self-imposed, so they effectively don't exist. And, I think that this is a problem beyond the Supreme Court. I think that we've seen this become a major issue in government for the United States over the past, quite a while, more, a decade plus, that our wacky system of government was put together, predicated on the idea that the people involved would be honorable actors. And when you get anybody involved at any level of government on any side that is not an honest broker, is not an honorable actor, the guardrails we have in place to protect us from that are really weak. And that applies to the Supreme Court as well. The founding fathers, in their infinite wisdom, they were drunk a lot of the times. And they just were. That's just reality. And and everybody was a more or less an honest dealer. And I think that as you move forward a couple hundred years, you wind up with the impetus to be dishonest is really high. And the Supreme Court, which I think most of us grew up thinking of them as these sort of exalted, untouchable, unimpeachable entities, have proven to be just as much self-serving as any other politician. And so a limit to their term, I think, would be positive for the country.
Yeah, I think the Supreme Court, I guess their public opinion is still a little higher than Congress, right? Congress, I forgot what it is right now, but the favorability of Congress. Larry, what kind of ethics rules does the Congress have? Do they need to put some in?
Let's go back to the original subject, which is whether or not we're going to change the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And I'm going to state the obvious because nobody else has so far. The only two times in the last 150 years or so that this has been attempted was both by the Democrats when they couldn't get what they wanted from the court that was appointed at the time it was appointed. And that, of course, is during Franklin Roosevelt and now. But I don't see anybody else from the left making a big deal out of 20 to 30 years of Earl Warren and William Douglas and all the other folks that were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that were all very much towards the left side. But all of a sudden, it's a big deal now. I think there's something fishy going on.
I would say that when a president with a year's worth of term left wants to nominate somebody and Congress won't hear about it, that's that's unconscionable. And it says basically that his pick for the Supreme Court justice that was his was basically, kicked away by Congress.
Okay,
And
so
that
he's been
starts-
borked. He's been borked. It happens every single year that there's an appointment.
How was he borked? He didn't even have a hearing. He wasn't.
The point is that
Bork
Robert Bork was
not approved.
Robert
Garland
Bork was eminently
Garland
qualified and
the
politically
Republicans
destroyed.
wouldn't even hold a hearing on Garland, and it was a
What?
100% political move. But that's
well, and
It's
then
politics on both sides, and if you want to change it, that's fine. But increasing the court and making the rules up as you go along, as Biden has done to make sure that this looks more left than right, is not the way to do it.
No.
All right.
Well,
Well,
we
we're
have-
gonna go
we
to
have
we're gonna take our
candidates
break on
Cancel
that
me.
one, guys.
lying to get
Oh,
the
you
nomination
said
passed,
no.
then they should be taken off of the court when it becomes clear that they lied.
Well, they can be impeached, though. It's one of those to where, I mean, there are precautions,
Okay.
and I don't necessarily know what the protocol
All right, you're gonna
is.
okay, Michelle. We're gonna stop it. We got to go and take our break for our sponsor. This is wonderful. This is I didn't know where this thing was gonna go. We'll be right back after our word from our sponsors. Be right back.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't play my games.
Call Your Computer Solutions today, and we will scan for viruses and clean that computer up remotely and make it fast again. Our phone number is 407-826-0810.
Thanks, Dad, my computer's fast again. Now I can do my homework. Thanks for calling Your Computer Solutions at 407-826-0810. The Tri-Beer Show would like to thank Boggy Creek Airboat Adventures for being one of our sponsors. I got to go on an airboat and saw a real gator. I even got to go to the gem mine and mine for some gems. We ate a steak dinner at the restaurant and even got some gator bites. If you want to have a blast with the entire family, I suggest you go to www.bcairboats.com right now. Get your tickets today. The website again is bcairboats.com.
Well, that was wonderful, guys. Well, let's kind of start back up again. We got to be able to make sure we make some money with this show or whatever. Deb, I know I kind of cut you off a little bit, and I know Michelle and Larry want to jump in, but without naming names, Deb, start it up again. Is it that bad? Isn't it really just political? Is Larry doesn't he have a point? I guess is what I'm saying. That right now the Democrats just don't like the court, and is that why this thing is happening?
Absolutely.
Well, I don't like the court because I've watched what has happened for these certain people to get there. And I don't like it when they, on very, very critical touch point issues, they say one thing in their nomination process and then they vote another way when they're actually on the court. And to me, that is really very, very unethical. Very unethical of them, and I don't feel like they should be, representing the top judiciary of this country by doing that.
Well, the thing I did see, Deb, that was really interesting, that it was even for the Washington Post, they talk about the fact that even though mostly been Republicans have actually had more of the nominations over our lifetime, let's say, Deb, so many of those nominations turned so liberal. I mean, there's all sorts of examples of that, okay, that they really did. It wasn't the other way around. Larry, I know, can you say a little bit more how political this is or what heck is going on now?
I'm standing on the outside looking in, and I've been a lawyer for 43 years now, and I've done a lot of work in the law. I've had constitutional law questions, and I think all of this is just plain beautiful politics. And if you want to keep playing politics, let's have fun and do it, but call it what it is.
Okay. Michelle, your turn to jump in there, see if we can start it up again. I hated to kill it. This is some great back and forth, and certainly I love the emotion in here. So, Michelle.
I mean, I can understand that with regards to on the other side and wanting to implement certain changes and everything. Unfortunately, it's not going to be passed. Unfortunately, there's no possibility that with regards to all the hurdles that need to occur, it's just not going to occur. But I do think, though, that I do like the aspect of term limits. I think that's something that should be a little bit more on the forefront. And I do think that there should be a standard, though, of code of ethics that they need to abide by, and maybe that Congress, it's not going to be an amendment. There's no possibility on that, but some type of code with regards to, gifts and gifts and luxury trips and so on and so forth, to where it's going to be in excess of what they deserve. I think that obviously should not be taking place.
Now, Jeff, you're probably saying that's like got no chance in hell of happening.
Well, I mean, I think that the ethics piece has a much greater chance of happening than expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court.
Okay.
There are mechanisms in place for that. I don't think it will.
It's
because
not going to be.
I'm just too cynical. But I would like to see the court expanded, not for ideological or partisan issues. I just think our court is too small.
Why is it too small?
It's only 9 people, and we have 13 circuit courts. Why don't we have a Supreme Court justice for each circuit?
Well, didn't it start?
I don't understand that.
What difference does that make to anything?
Yeah.
It's everybody has a region and an appeals court that is for their area. Yet we have 9 unelected and now, frankly, unvetted people, and not just this Supreme Court, previous ones as well. As an example, I'll use, Ginsburg should have resigned years and years before she passed away, and she knew it. And they get to the point where they're out of touch with the American people. They're out of touch with and the longer they stay, the worse that becomes. They get older. They're in this rarefied air of being in the Supreme Court. And correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, you would probably know best, but didn't the Supreme Court, wasn't it initially set up where there was a justice for each circuit court of appeals?
That wasn't the reason it was done. It just happened to work out that way.
It was just a
Supreme Court, yeah. The court also had 7 members at one point, 9. It went up to 11. Exactly. This is not unusual in terms of what you're addressing. The only main thing I want to address in here is Bob's question of ethics and whether or not the court should be expanded. And I think ethics, fine. Court expansion, need a hell of a lot more than Biden saying, let's go do this. Well,
absolutely.
After he's decided he's not running and he knows he's got 3 months left.
Oh, no, he's saying it again. Stop.
I did it again.
I know.
I'm sorry. I'm doing it on purpose, people.
Oh,
well, I mean, how else? But then, Larry, how else does a conversation, does a national conversation get started about these things?
It can get
talking about it. We're already
Well,
talking
yeah,
about
before
it.
started
But I mean,
I'd like to see some piece of paper or some study or some commission or some group that addressed this before. That's all. And none of this happened. It was totally, nothing happened. We just have a pronouncement. This is what I want to do, knowing full well it's not even possible to make it happen.
That's the truth.
That's
the truth. There's no way.
I read one proposal
but it's not impossible.
Talked about a way to have the term limits for being a voting Supreme Court justice, so that the justices would get whatever that time frame was. I personally think 12 is enough. The proposal of the president is 18, but that once they hit that, they can still be a Supreme Court justice doing the work of the court, but they do not sit in judging cases. And I thought that was an interesting.
What's the point of being in the Supreme Court?
Why bother?
What?
Why bother then?
Why bother though?
That's their choice if they want to. If not, if like a certain somebody said, well, the pay isn't worth the time, well, then get out.
Okay, so now we're going to judge people on whether they stay because maybe politically that might make a difference if we expand the court. That's going to make it better.
It's not expanding the court as far as the justices who are actually adjudicating.
But that's what the Supreme Court's for. They don't do anything else. They don't write the opinions. They don't do any of the work. It's all done by law clerks. You think these guys are actually writing these opinions?
No, and it's all, all of their decisions are based upon, appeals. They're not going out there and establishing.
They don't write anything.
Yeah, they don't.
They're basically a fraternity of people that are going to set the direction And the reason it's gotten so political is because the political side of our government can't get its act together. And
well,
so
I think that we wouldn't be calling it so political if there wasn't recent shocking scandals by certain members of the Supreme Court.
Oh, okay. You're talking about one person that took some gifts from a friend that helped him enjoy his life because he doesn't get paid enough as a lawyer in the Supreme Court. If he was out in private practice, he would have been making millions of dollars.
Well, then why doesn't he go out to private practice?
Because he has an obligation in his own heart to try to make this country better when a lot of other people on the left side keep trying to tear us down.
So he's grifting from these multi-mega $1-million people that have business in front of the court. It's been proven. And if you want to just talk about the money from a friend, the loan for that Winnebago should have been on his taxes, and it wasn't. The forgiven part of the loan.
It wasn't even
the money that was paid for his nephew was out of this guy's business account. So it wasn't no friend giving him money to pay for his, nephew's schooling. It's all smoke and mirrors for grift. And that's the name of the game for the individual president who was in charge when this guy was confirmed.
I think they're all pretty bad.
was,
I mean, if we wanted
who
to
was
start,
president
Exactly.
when Thomas-
I
when
mean,
he
if
was
we want,
confirmed?
no, listen, if we wanted, I mean, we'd be having, I hate to do this, but gold bars in the freezer. I mean, they're all bad. And guys, here's what I'm trying to do by this show.
And lock that guy under the
all
jail.
politicians are horrible, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if we started to get into whataboutism between all of these damn politicians, the problem is we've never really seen the Supreme Court face this, at least since my lifetime anyway.
Didn't they
All right, we keep getting the temperature up, and I'm really not taking a break to get the temperature down. But, and by the way, go on YouTube, subscribe, and go to the website, thirdsideconvo.com. And we're loving this. It's just, they're making us angry, these politicians. Maybe we can calm down and figure out where we agree at the next segment. We'll be right back.
Corona Cigar Company is your one-stop shop for all your cigar needs. Whether that's a brand new humidor, a box of those new cigars you've been waiting for, a top-of-the-line cutter or lighter, a place to enjoy the finest cigars and spirits with friends, or the only cigars grown right here in the Sunshine State, we've got you covered. Come visit one of our retail locations for the ultimate cigar experience. Visit us online at coronacigar.com.
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
Yeah, I think we'd like to show anger on a lot of these damn politicians. And like I said before, maybe we didn't have the Supreme Court into this mix. And Deb, and I apologize, I kind of talked over you a little bit right before I was supposed to go on a break is when all of a sudden the excitement got there and I kind of let you go. And so I apologize that I kind of cut you off a little bit, Deb. And but let's try to see. I think, Michelle, you've already said something about term limits. Larry, can we find agreement somewhere where we ought to have a consideration of that, or do you not see a problem with that?
I would love to see a consideration of it, but I'd also like to see it in a consideration that has been looked at, bipartisan commission, whatever you want to call it. This just comes out of nowhere. My only point to today is I'm not opposed to reform. I'm not opposed to limits. I'm not opposed to ethics. The point is a lame duck president literally puts this out. At the same time, they need to try to figure out how to get votes because they're going to lose this election badly. And that's why it was done. And that's it.
All right. Okay. We're going to jump around the board now, and the hourglass is coming out, so everybody's got 30 seconds. I had to add a little more time to Larry because he's always lacking, guys. You just got to realize that. Okay. So we're now on the 30-second clock. Jeff, with you, where do you see that we might have some common ground?
Well, I think that Larry just summed it up pretty nicely. I think that, we all agree that some ethics guardrails that are enforceable and a term limit for the Supreme Court. I think that even if we disagreed a little bit on that, I don't think we would disagree vehemently about that. That can only be good. Personally, I would like to see more justices that have a financial conflict recuse themselves from certain things.
Okay.
I think that would take the temperature down a lot.
Perfect. All right, Michelle, you're on the clock.
I mean, I'm in agreement though with everybody else though with regards to term limits, a code of ethics. But I do believe though that they have stipulated though in their proposal on full disclosure with regards to their financial data and gifts and things that that they are taken into consideration or things that they are utilizing that they should be disclosing, and unfortunately they aren't. But I do agree though with everybody else in that respect.
Gotcha. Deb, yeah, I know you want to go a little further on this, but you're even thinking impeachment, but those are specific cases which we'll probably have to talk about offline, we'll say, or off the show. So, Deb, give me your 30 seconds. You got to flip it again.
Talk about sending a message. I think one needs to be sent. I think this whole topic has really started when the Roe v. Wade and some of these decisions were made, and it started making people take a double take as to what exactly was going on with the Supreme Court and how, no control bars are on them at all, which is really not appropriate. Okay. And, we need to have something more.
Yeah, you'd probably find.
I was thinking about looking at, some of the current Supreme Court justices that are, that are not on there. We were talking about initially or a little bit earlier, though, about the ones that didn't and step aside. Maybe they can be an oversight committee. The ones that have, they're no longer on the Supreme Court, but have been a portion of it.
Larry, would you agree that this probably started with the Dobbs decision? Probably is what started this whole mess, isn't it?
It started with Roe v. Wade back in '73. You had half the country that was opposed to that decision and remained opposed all the way until recently. But they didn't riot. They didn't say we got to change the court. They didn't say we had to stack the court. They got to the point where their person was elected to put enough votes in on the Supreme Court to say, we're not talking about whether it's legal or not. We're just saying that the states ought to decide. And that's a huge issue. That's a hell of a lot smaller issue than when the whole thing was legalized in '73. Okay? And
Jeff, can you respond
are we talking about expanding the court?
Jeff, respond to Larry on that one. I mean, would you agree that in '73 that there were lots of people upset with that one?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I can't speak firsthand to '73 because I was 5 years old. But at the same time, I think that the proof is in the pudding. As soon as this came down from this particular sitting Supreme Court, look at what happened with the voters in Kansas. Look at what happened with the voters in Ohio. They overwhelmingly put a pro-choice amendment into their state constitution. What could be more ruby red than Kansas? And that just tells you that women don't want guys like us telling them what the hell to do.
Oh, but there's other states that have been restrictive. I'm not voting in favor of or against the decision, but leaving it up to the states is a hell of a lot easier decision than just saying it's legal across 50 states. But nobody was packing the court back then.
Leaving it up to the states, to me, is a cop-out for the federal government, federal legislation that impacts the lives of every single woman in the country.
There's no federal legislation.
Exactly. No,
legislation was wrong.
Jeff, there's no federal legislation.
Legislation was I misspoke on legislation.
Okay, so we have Governor DeSantis now wanting to, penalize and
put the sign on her, man.
All right, we got it. All right.
Okay,
believe it or not, We only have 20 seconds left, and here's all I'm going to say. There are many reasons why abortion is one of those topics I have not been able to come up with a way to talk about. It's just too close to everybody's heart. This is, y'all, this was a wonderful show, y'all. I didn't know where it was going to go, but
I am pro-abortion. Don't get me wrong in terms of the decision or what we've been talking about. It's not about whether abortion should be legal or not. It's about the constitutionality and the decision-making side of it. So I am pro-abortion, okay?
Oh,
Just
no,
for
and
the
I'm
record
sure we
here.
could do that. I'm just saying to have 2 people against it and 2 people for it, that's a tough discussion, and I've just chosen not to do that on
But
Third Side
it's-
Convo. However, I would love to see you on the Third Side Convo next week. Thank you so much for a great show, and we will see you later.